great. So the bad news is we got off to a late start. The good news is, the meeting should be very, very brief. Because a lot of the media stuff we had intended to cover tonight, we're gonna defer to Thursday. But before we go any further, the first item on the agenda, public comment. Do we have anybody who wants to offer public comment? I don't see any members of the public in the room. Online, anybody want to share public comment?
Nobody.
Okay.
Attendees.
No public comment. The next agenda item on the fiscal year 26 guidelines, recall we voted to approve the preliminary guideline at our November meeting. We solicited feedback from town and school leadership on the preliminary number. We haven't received anything as of yet. I understand the town is working on a response.
Yeah, well, so really quick, I know Kerry was working on a response. I can tell you, based on the 2.6 guideline, that would just about cover the salary increases. And that's it. So, which means everything else would be not even level services, it's kind of would be level funded. So I think Kerry is looking for a similar kind of guideline to last year, and she was hoping to send something for you tonight. If not, she certainly will be there on Thursday to talk about it, but I think that's where would be requesting is to kind of go back to the 3.25.
Okay. Okay, so we'll look forward to receiving that,
Yeah.
with some more specifics. Any reaction or any questions in response to that? I know that was a brief summary of what's coming. John?
Yeah, I think we should expect it from everyone. No one wants to see the numbers go down. They've been used to the last 12 years getting what they want. Oh, the groups would be the committee on CPS regional in town, under the guise of level services. And there's been really, no auditing going on about how this process works. You're just taking everyone at their word. So expect to hear from the schools, I think the exact same thing. And I think it's up to us to decide if we want to put fiscal responsibility first or just keep going on with the level services and watch Prop 2.5 hit any real soon and have no real fiscal responsibility in this town.
Others? Don?
I have a comment.
Carla, can you hear us? Because people are not speaking into the mics.
The microphone will be working anyways. It's all
Oh,
on
is
the
that
audio.
okay, great, okay.
Yeah,
Yes, I could hear Don speaking just now, and I could hear you too, Lois. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
I'll be brief with this, and Eric, if you prefer, I can bring it up again another time, but in thinking about the topic last week that I had raised previously, which was, should we have a guideline or a policy, and we don't have policies per se. I was wondering if we want to entertain proposing a warrant article to create a policy for the town. Then it would say that the town and the schools, as the budget entities that are majority funded by town property tax revenue, are directed to provide a service level that may be funded within the limits of the Proposition 2.5 levy limit plus other funding sources. And if we do that and it goes to town meeting, and if town meeting votes no, then we know the town is open to overrides. And if the town votes yes, then it's becomes policy. So something to think about. Yeah.
That makes me think of something. Have we ever discussed possibly holding each year to some sort of CPI?
Well, we take that into consideration, our guidelines.
I know we take it into consideration in our guidelines, but it just made me think of it that I have had service contracts for years with customers where we just say, you know, instead of having to renegotiate every year,
Yeah, we push through a CPI.
we just say that from year to year, the fees will remain the same, except for an adjustment. And you can say CPI, you can pick another number, a benchmark.
Well, we can still run into the levy limit that way, because it's 2.5% of the assessed valuation of all the property in town.
Yeah.
Which is.
Still pretty good,
Yeah, so, I know this is tangential to the,
What I'm
point, but I don't
thinking,
want to
though-
hijack the.
What I'm thinking though, Dawn, is it would save us from having to set a guideline. I mean, it would be hard and fast. It would be, this is the number.
Before we spend a lot of time on that, I really think we should bring it to the moderator, who may want to bring it to council. I don't think we necessarily have that authority.
When you say we, you mean FinCom or the town?
FinCom, and I'm not sure that, I mean, town meeting has the authority to approve individual budgets. I've never heard of that kind of proactive anticipatory cap. That's what Prop 2.5.
That's what 2.5.
Yeah, Prop 2.5 does that.
Yeah, but there's nothing that tells the town and the schools that they have to abide to set their budgets within that. Up to it.
Town meeting tells them when they approve or disapprove the budgets. You know, our role is to advise. We're not elected by anybody. I have to think more about it, Donna. This is the
Yeah.
first time I'm hearing this idea from you, but it makes me uneasy, and before we spend a lot of time on it, I would want to have the town moderator and potentially town council let us know if that's even something we can do.
Well, that would be, I think, a next step if there is a consensus here that pursue the idea.
Well, I think we're just, you know, it's just a process discussion then. I don't think, we have a lot of stuff to do, and I don't know that that's a productive use of our time if it's pointless. So I'd like to get some guidance about whether or not that kind of that warrant article is something we could even consider bringing.
Or is there other ways to learn what you want to learn, which is whether the town is comfortable with overrides or not? Isn't that that's what you're trying to learn?
That's a big piece of it, Lindsay, and the other piece is that everything, I'm one who supported everything in the past, because I wasn't cognizant of the overall topic.
Right.
And I think part of our job now is to, one of our goals this year is to better communicate where we are as a community relative to this pie. And so this would be one way of,
This is a bit of a forcing mechanism for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it would be to the budgeting entities,
Mhm.
it would be on them.
Mhm.
Okay, Peggy,
Yeah, I don't know whether I missed it or it wasn't communicated, but I was a little surprised to see the operational override on the horizon this closely this year. Maybe it was there the last couple of years, I just didn't notice it. But, you know, it changes everything. And Dawn, I mean, I think we could start our budget every year with a number that's gonna keep that slope, you know, under the 2.5. And kind of go from there. If people wanna increase that, then they know in a couple of years, the school committee knows. The regional committee knows, town knows, we all know that we're going to the ballot box just to get level services approved. And I think they're conveying that in a timely manner, or almost a pretty tight, timely, not so timely manner. To citizens of Concord and at the next town meeting, showing that where we're headed, if they, which they probably will. Approve a budget that's higher than our initial guideline.
okay. Why don't we, I think it's an interesting idea, Dawn, it is somewhat separate from the question of finalizing the guidelines, so what I would propose, just to keep this kind of sequential, is let's get to Thursday, let's get to that final guideline and take this up after Thursday. I don't wanna dismiss the idea, but I just suggest sequencing it that way.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea, but it's not gonna happen this year. Or next year probably, for this fiscal year probably. To move this side, you know, even if you have to bring it forward, basically. So because we don't have the time.
If we do,
Yeah.
the warrant isn't closing for a while, we could make, if this is doable and the consensus of the committee is they wanna do it, there's time.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I think so.
I think-
More time this
I
year.
think what we're, the productive exercise we're asking for is what do these budgets look like if they meet the guideline? And what do they look if they meet the desired budget? And then, there are two alternatives to, you know, somewhere in between or whatnot, but, either the hearings and the boards and whatnot will have two alternatives to look at. And I don't know, maybe town meeting will have two alternatives to look at, we've done that before. The high and the low.
Okay.
I think what we're doing is asking, people who are managing significant budgets to find savings. Now, Anthony just told us that at our initial guideline, at the preliminary guideline number, he has no discretion. It gets completely eaten up by salaries, and he has no discretion to find savings somewhere else to meet the guideline. The schools have historically, the schools have a very large budget, and when we press them on the amount, they tend to come back with savings that are focused on student-facing expenses, on popular programs. It's different. It would be nice to actually see an attempt being made to find savings in things that are not politically
Special
charged.
education.
That's me.
Yeah, so I think we have to go through this process, let the town present to us what the consequences are and what the alternative proposal are, and hope that and let the schools do the same thing, and hope that those responses take into consideration that we are asking them to really look hard at their budgets and find savings. You do that in corporations all the time. Yeah, but you can't cut from non-discretionary.
But you remember when we did have to go to those operational overrides, we've had like 3 budgets in town meeting, the no override, small override, bigger override. And the budget article would go for a whole night. Do you remember?
I don't remember that because that was when my husband was still alive and he was the one who was on the town committees, and I got to not do it.
So that was.
So I
back
don't,
in
so I'll
6,
trust your
7,
memory.
6, 7, 8, around there.
Yeah,
And there'd be 3, alternatives, and the lowest one would be the default alternative if it wasn't approved at the ballot. Because the higher one was usually approved at town meeting. And that's where we're headed.
going back to that doesn't really sound like forward progress, maybe reminding the budgeting entities that that's what used to happen, and that was what could happen again, might
Exactly.
encourage them to be a little, to be rigorous in looking for actual savings.
That was a line where my thoughts were, is, I mean, we're convincing the budget entities to come to the table to avoid like the uncertain time that could yield. And like, people have to understand the reality of the situation and the constraints, and we can't assume that they're not gonna come to the table. Like, we have to create the opportunity for them to come to the table, incentivize them to come to the table, let them prove us wrong if they don't, but have that discussion.
Which is Thursday, which is, but the deadline to get back to us with feedback, and if they don't, then we're gonna have to make the decisions without that input. Sounds like the town will have gotten back to us, and hopefully the schools will too, and we can see.
So remind me the consequences, if the increases exceed 2.5. It can't be approved at the town meeting?
There has to be a right on an override, there has to be a vote for an override, so town meeting can't do it, it has to go to the ballot.
It has to, so you have to have an election.
It's,
Yeah.
right. It's not if it exceeds 2.5, it's if it exceeds the levy limit. If we go above the state imposed cap,
Mhm.
on the total aggregate property tax. We would then have to.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I think that's what you were saying in
See.
shorthand, Kathy. But that's.
It's not a percent, it's a total dollar.
Yeah.
But
Eric,
it equates to 2.5% of the valuation
Yeah,
of.
but it's not the same as increasing
So,
taxes this year. by
Oh, no,
20%.
not at all.
so would you then, once we know.
Right.
What people, what the entities are asking for an increase. And you know that it's going to be above that levy limit. Would you just not have town meeting and just call it an
no, of course
election?
not. You have, no, that's not what happens.
No,
But there
that's what
has
I'm
to be a-
asking is,
If the, as I understand it, the budget's approved at town meeting would result in. Our exceeding the levy limit, then. There has to be a subsequent vote at the ballot confirming that, and if the override vote fails, this is really simplistic, and I could be getting parts of it wrong. If the override vote fails, then the overall budget is capped at the levy limit, and the budgeting entities have to figure out how to meet that requirement.
okay,
So ideally, that levy limit budget is available at town meeting, so the budgeting entities and the citizens know what it means before, in case.
And that's what
Let
happened
me-
all those years ago when I was a
Okay,
kid.
Let me go online.
My question is,
But Lois.
has this
never
ever
failed
happened
before.
here?
Yeah,
What?
that's for picking
Never
yourself.
failed.
It's
Oh,
failed
yeah.
six.
It hasn't yet.
Colin, I see you've had your hand up.
This is one of the disadvantages of participating online. This is a great discussion. I just want to let you folks know, I did find a document that references the 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008 override votes as they prepared for the special town elections. Eric, I will send you that document so you can take a look at it. It was a town document.
Okay, and I'll distribute it. Okay, so more to come from the town. Thanks for that heads up, Anthony. I touched base with Carrie Rankin on the school committee. They are also planning to share feedback. They're gonna come to our meeting on Thursday to share it live, so Thursday's gonna be a busy meeting. Cause our goal again is to vote on the final guideline on Thursday. Cause we do have a timetable and a deadline we need to meet, and I don't wanna.
But you expect all the feedback by Thursday?
By Thursday, yeah, we had asked for it by today, we didn't get it. We wanna be collaborative with the budget unit leaders, so we'll go into Thursday. The other piece of the discussion tonight was gonna be tax implications. That piece is not quite ready, so we're likewise gonna defer that to Thursday as well. It's gonna be a busy night. Anything else on the guidelines? Don?
I have a request, and I'm not quite sure how to put this, but my observation is that in the past. We have asked the schools in particular what they would cut. And of course, to your point, Lois, they'll propose something that will get the parents to turn out in opposition to the cut. And I've watched the school committee meetings in advance of those, and it's not discussed by the school committee. So I think that they are hearing it for the first time when the superintendent brings it to us. And then it goes in a email newsletter to the parents. That's knowing that that's going to happen, I want to ask, can we not ask what's going to be cut? Can we just
Yes.
leave it up to them?
And I think that did happen, it hasn't happened every year, it happened one year, a year before last. Where there was a specific request made by the chair, Peggy, for specific cuts, and I do not think we should do that this year. And I think it's inappropriate for us to do it. It's, they should be able to identify where they can make savings. I think the town, and hopefully that now that the The school committee has really, I think, been cooperative, trying to be cooperative this year. Hopefully, they will identify areas where there can actually be savings rather than areas that might create more emotion.
I think that's very generous of you to think that. I mean, yes.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because-
but I understand.
Kathy, it
My sense, Lois, is they have been successful in a particular way. And if they need the money, I mean,
Yeah,
look,
but
it's a tactic.
they've been less. The vote last year, I was really sorry that Carmen didn't do a count last year. on the vote.
Thank you.
Not, I was really sorry she didn't, not that I disagree. But because I think it was actually a very close vote.
It was.
And I think an actual ballot count, it was late, people were tired,
Okay, all right.
but an actual count would have shown that it was a very close vote over a number that was, what was it, $150,000?
$98,000.
Out of a $7,000 budget,
Yeah,
but,
okay.
and I believe that the people who are on the school committee now, people who were there last year, the superintendent, they all saw that. And they are hearing, as we are all hearing, that the tax burden in town is becoming untenable. They are hearing that. So let's see what happens this year.
Okay.
Let's not presume bad faith.
Okay, Paul and then Pat.
I also have heard the superintendent speak about, the costs that she can't control due to special education, that is just mandated. And I think we came to the table understanding that that is, something that is difficult for her to plan, removed it from the table and gave her the opportunity to be a, willing partner in the negotiation. Now, if they choose not to be a willing partner in the negotiation, then we don't necessarily have to maintain that preliminary view that makes their lives easier. When it comes to segregating the special education costs and the preliminary, estimate. I think we're actually giving her something that she's wanted for a while, so it would not behoove her to, and when I say her, it's just easier to say the superintendent.
Okay.
It would, but we'll see. I don't know, but there's plenty of opportunity for, a willing participant to come to the table with something to give.
I think we have to give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's just try. And she's under a new contract. Gotta listen to her, see what it is. But I think we all know that last year really can't be repeated. We can't, she got up there and announced to the entire audience that the $198,000 was to take away a STEM person when we were rated as #1 in STEM, which by the way, we're not, okay? So give her the benefit of the doubt. There are clearly a couple of yellow school buses for $350,000. I've looked at closely. That again, I think we can toy with as a committee if we're not, if we think we're under risk again, as we have historically and certainly from last year.
Thank you, Pat. For what it's worth. I give them the benefit of the doubt. If you listen to them in recent meetings, they're extremely complimentary of the finance committee's work and how transparent we've been. They acknowledge the numbers, the preliminary numbers this year are low, but, the sense I get is that, they understand how we got there. So I'm optimistic that we're gonna go into town meeting. It may not be perfectly
Good.
aligned on the numbers, but,
Great.
I hope they understand how we got there and where we're going.
right.
That's good point.
You know, and I think if anything, that the finance committee has elucidated this year is the trajectory. The override, the levy limit trajectory. And, you know.
And to your point, you said you weren't aware of how close we were, and neither was I, and we're FinCom members, so just think how everybody
No,
else
never, you know,
in that room.
I think we suffered through turnover in the finance department here. And that's one of the reasons some things are becoming more clear now than they were. Cause we had a lot of turnover in there.
So to this revelation in terms of not knowing. Is this something that would lend itself to us doing another Concord Bridge
Absolutely.
article?
We used to do,
A couple of.
so I was on the
pages?
school committee, I'm sorry, on the select board. When we did all those overrides. And so we used to put, letter after letter and charts and diagrams and everything to try. And get people to understand where we're headed and see if it's. They voted for the override, but it was crazy.
I think that's a good idea, Kathy. I think once we set the final guideline again on Thursday, I think that's a good opportunity to get out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and
I think it's a good
it's also,
Yeah,
it's also two separate paths, right? I see this, it's like, this is this year, but this is. Projecting the future, talking about the future, so, whatever, yes, we need to do one step at a time.
but they don't do it now, there's gonna be a real hard stop later.
And we did lay some groundwork for it. The last couple of finance committee
Yes,
reports
We did.
emphasized that it wasn't all rosy.
we weren't in great shape.
We weren't in great shape. And another thing we did, you gotta do the work before annual meeting, but we started getting on the agenda at annual meeting. The last two annual meetings, there was a presentation. We have to push it back a little because if you do it too early, nobody's there yet. But we did get on the agenda. We did do presentations. We probably should think about handouts that we should have for town meeting. Because people do pick things up if they've missed a presentation. Yeah, we have an advisory and it's kind of an educating role.
Okay. Colin, you get the last word on this.
Okay. Not the last word, but Lois just cued me on something. I asked a question at the most recent league presentation about how town meeting could be changed. Whether or not a one-page handout showing FinCom's and select board's recommendation on warrant articles would be a good idea. And Eric Moore, the chair of that committee, said, absolutely, yes, that would be useful.
Yes, it would. It's in the FinCom report, but it sometimes changes in between that and town meeting. It absolutely should be that. And it's easy. It's just updating a couple pages of the report.
Okay. So looking ahead to Thursday. This is our draft agenda. We'll get this finalized and posted tomorrow. I've extended the time, so it was originally 6:30 to 8:30. I've extended it to 9 because we're gonna take up that deferred tax implications item. The goal is to discuss and vote on the final guideline. Dawn, as a standing item going forward, I added planning for the annual report.
Okay.
Liaison reports. Please send me your liaison updates by noon tomorrow, and I'll compile the report. I think it makes sense to do another check-in on our schedule for the year and our goals, where we stand. Minutes, correspondence, and then adjourn by 9 p.m. Anything else before we adjourn tonight? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Discussion. None.
None.
Okay, we need a roll call.
Oh.
Because we have members online.
I thought we were in a standing vote.
You don't need a roll call to adjourn, even if.
You
it's
don't?
on-
Okay, I understand. Okay.
You're good.
We're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
You don't even need a